Children are an endangered species. That's like a headline you might see in 50 years because apparently nobody's having kids. Why is nobody having babies? What's gonna happen to us when we're older? What is going to happen to the world? Does it even matter? I don't know, let's see.
The US fertility rate drops to another historic low. Births in Japan hit record low. Italy's national birth rate is declared a national emergency. Nearly every country is due to shrink by 2100. There's little to no doubt that there's like an ongoing fertility crisis. People are choosing to not have babies anymore. From South Korea to the United States to Norway.
Japan and South Korea, they go from 6 children per woman to not even 1? That's crazy.
Pretty much every rich country. And you might not think this is a problem, but it is a problem for a few reasons. The reality is that people are living longer than ever at the moment.
I think we're dropping. Like, I think America's not one of the highest longing living countries anymore. This is showing 80s. I think we're even like below those, aren't we? Like, I thought America was doing horrible.
New workers to replace the ones that are retiring. You need new workers to pay taxes that will eventually fund the pensions of those people.
PTSD looking at that form.
You need young people in the workforce to take care of those older people. In the 1960s, there were 6 people of working age for every retired person.
What's interesting about this is that going to be true in 50 years. It says you have all of these working people to take care of the old people, but I think it's not crazy to suggest that there will be enough robots in 50 years to take care of us. I mean, maybe that is crazy, but I'm pretty sure that's gonna happen.
2035, it's expected to be 2 to 1. This is one of those topics where if you ask 5 different people, you'll get 5 completely different answers as to what the reason is. People tend to have quite strong opinions. Some people might say it's a cost of living issue. Some people might.
It doesn't make sense though, because the graph we saw showed declining birth rates like 50 years ago in Japan and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know much about Japan's history though. Maybe it is.
Say that it's to do with declining rates of religion in the world. Some people might blame women's liberation movements, for example. Either way, no matter what people say, they're typically pretty certain that either their experience or their belief is the reason why.
So one of these is what caused it, is what he's saying. Cost of living feels like the most obvious answer to me, but I don't know.
On a global scale, people aren't having children. I think we can do better than that, because when I see that there's a problem that is affecting Norway, the US, Taiwan, and France, I tell myself that there's got to be like a better answer that we can give, right? Because these countries are completely different.
That's what I'm thinking. They probably have different economies, different everything. To me, it's nothing on this list.
Childcare situation, for example, in Norway is vastly different to the childcare situation in the US, which is vastly different to the UK. So I feel like we can get a better answer than just this one-line solution of, oh, it's the cost of living. I think we can do better. If you'd asked me, to be honest, like even just a couple of weeks ago, I would have put the blame squarely on the cost of housing.
First off, UK, yo, that's insane. Wow. I mean, jeez, y'all are getting screwed. What the heck happened in 2005? Okay, cost of housing. I don't think so. That doesn't make sense to me. This one I'm not gonna buy, but still, I wouldn't blame that because I think families, they would still want to have kids even if you're in an apartment.
In fact, there's this one chart that lives like in my head rent-free.
More like rent that's 180% higher than it used to be, am I right? Sorry, England.
Chart that compares the growth of house prices to the growth of incomes in the UK. And intuitively, to me, it feels like that's why people wouldn't want to have kids.
Just this graph though alone is scary to look at, because if you look at this, what's frightening about this to me is that it doesn't seem sustainable. Probably even worse than what it is now. I mean, that's crazy, dude.
For a lot of people, it feels that way. But I want to challenge my intuition, and maybe we can reach a more nuanced answer as to why this is more of a global problem than necessarily.
Maybe it's like astrologically in the stars, we're in a period of time where babies do not get made. Maybe it's something like that. We could think outside the box a little bit.
A specific localized problem. For example, this is a piece of research from the US, which tried to establish what the effect of a $10,000 increase in housing would be on people's decision to have kids. Unsurprisingly, if house prices go up, it corresponds to a 2.4% drop in the decision to have kids.
Oh, I think I know what's happening here. All the stuff adds up to create a storm for less babies. That's my guess.
You are renting.
Why is this happening?
However, if you own your home, you actually become more likely to have kids as house prices go up. The net effect of
I own my house, so that must mean I'm more likely to have kids. That's crazy.
this is that when house prices go up in the US, more people actually want to have kids, which is really counterintuitive.
Wait. What? A $10,000 increase in prices increases babies? Wait, that doesn't make sense. Everything I just said now makes no sense. What?
Variance, because in the UK, the effect of increasing house prices is a net decrease. And this is just one piece of evidence that immediately helps us understand that we can't just think of this problem as a one-line solution. Clearly, housing can't explain the...
So Americans are like, yo, the house is more expensive. Let's go have some babies because we're not going to have a house. Let's at least be happy from a kid. British people are like, well, the house is expensive. I don't want kids. I'm depressed. I hate everything. All we eat is gray food and brown food.
The full picture. I think the cost of having children is another huge factor that people typically fall back on when they explain the reasons why people aren't having kids. It's too expensive. However, it seems that even paying people to have kids isn't working very well. Taiwan spent more than $3 billion trying to get its citizens to have more children. And it's had no success at all. In France, they've spent even more money, about 4% of their GDP on...
No way. 4% of their GDP just to have babies? What?
Various measures to encourage people to have children. To put this into perspective, if the US spent 4% of its GDP on family measures, that would be the equivalent of the entire defense budget. So countries are actually, some countries at least.
So I know we don't know what the problem is yet, but if I had to think what I would do to increase birth rates and the people don't want money, every house doubles in price of a president. You know what? Let's quadruple it because that'll really spike us. Because Americans have more babies with more expensive homes.
Are actually spending a huge amount of money on things like tax breaks, things like direct cash transfers, and things like childcare benefits to encourage people to have kids. So clearly there's a bit more to this whole situation than meets the eye initially. And I think we can maybe look at some of the research and evidence because there is a whole body of research and evidence to engage with. And I've tried to find the best bits to share it with you. And I'm curious to hear what your opinions are on these different aspects.
I'll tell you.
What I do find really interesting is like how the narrative has changed around this topic. Because a couple of decades ago, overpopulation was all the rage.
Dude, I remember when I was a kid, and I remember my parents were saying like there's a 2-child policy in China, and I thought that was the craziest thing ever. I just thought, oh, the population's too big. I kind of wonder if we got older, that mindset stayed with us a little bit.
Of the discussion around the number of people on Earth revolved around the fact that there were too many people. And we have two people to blame for this. First of all, we have this dude here. His name is Thomas Malthus.
Oh, bro's name's Thomas.
And
I knew he looked like a Thomas. You can just tell. There's like that Thomas.
He's an 18th century economist. And he was the first major figure to really write about this idea of a population boom. He saw that the quality of life in 18th century England was dropping pretty quickly. And he said that there was just too many people and that we'd get to a point where there wouldn't be enough food to sustain the growing population.
Oh, so this guy was stupid because he didn't realize the production of food would also scale as technology got better.
And a couple of decades later, another professor wrote about the same topic. His name was Paul Ehrlich. And he wrote a book called The Population Bomb. And people really believed them. To kind of put into perspective how scared people were.
It says, while you are reading these words, 5 people, mostly children, have died of starvation and 40 more babies have been born.
Of overpopulation. I want to share a quote by the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the US, who said that overpopulation could be more explosive than the atomic or hydrogen bomb. Even on the other side of the world, in China, these fears of overpopulation promoted China's decision to implement their one-child policy, the whole package of laws and regulations designed to stop Chinese people from having more than one child. If we fast forward to today, those fears were like clearly unfounded. Yeah. I think most of us understand that food insecurity is a distribution problem and not an agriculture problem. And instead, we've ended up in the situation where underpopulation is the problem.
Wow, but if it keeps going this rate, which I also think is inaccurate because we can't assume that it won't change. I don't know, maybe we can. Why can't we assume that? I don't know. I just assume it's gonna change because I feel like it can't go up forever. You gotta come down a little bit and then you go up more, is my opinion. I'm basing that off of literally nothing.
I wanna take a little bit of time to talk about the US specifically, because I think they've got some really interesting factors that paint a different picture of the fertility crisis to the one that you might have in your head at the moment. This is a graph of the US fertility rates, and it's
number of births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 44. Okay, that's crazy.
The kind of graph that makes you want to jump to a specific conclusion or a one-line answer.
I mean, it is lower. It obviously started at a very clear point and stayed around there, around like the 1980s, which I think was correlated to something. I don't know.
So what's going on here? But the real interesting part of this graph isn't what it looks like now. It's what it looks like when you kind of break it down by demographics. If we look at birth rate divided by age, we see some really interesting trends.
I mean, those are actually rising. Obviously, like younger people's dropping, which is great to see. I think that's probably good. It looks like 30 to 34 actually is also rising, but the reason it's dropping is the 20 to 24-year-old is dropping. Interesting. So my demographic is dropping the ball.
Somewhat surprisingly, The fertility rate amongst women over 30 has actually been steadily rising since the 19...
Wait, that does make sense though, because that means less girls are having babies when they're younger and now they're having them when they're older. I bet a lot of girls are like, oh, I'll have a baby when I'm older, and either they can't when they're older or they choose not to because they're now super invested in their career. They don't actually want one. That could be the answer.
However, you might see something else that's quite interesting. Birth rates amongst 15 to 19-year-old women in the US dropped dramatically. The actual figure is 77%.
Wow.
And they actually explain that more than half of the drop in America's total fertility rate.
More than half the drop is from girls under the age of 19? I didn't know it was that common. Whoa. Around a third of the missing births would have been unplanned, and the majority would have been to women with low incomes. That seems like a good thing that's not happening.
In the UK, we actually see a similar trend where women at age 20 are having half as many children. Unlike richer women, these young women are not going to compensate by having more kids in the future.
Didn't they used to have kids back in the day so they could work on the farm? My second executive order after I quadruple house prices, I will force everybody to own a farm that's too big for them to handle themselves. They will be forced to have children to work the farm. I'm doing pretty well, I think.
Obviously, it would be unreasonable to say that the reason that no one is having kids is purely because teen pregnancies are down. The economic aspect of it is clearly important. It's clearly relevant.
Does this mean if we have better economic situations in America, more teenagers will have babies? That's crazy. That's not the thing I would have thought would have been the conclusion so far, but okay.
That the countries that have the lowest fertility rate in Europe, countries like Italy, Spain, and Greece, are also the countries with the highest youth unemployment, the countries where young people live with their parents for the longest.
The farm idea isn't bad.
The economy is in the bin, basically. And if you just ask young adults why they're not having kids, a lot of them will say that it's simply because childcare.
Think about this. I'm getting back to robots. I'm not joking. I'm being serious. There will be like robots that could take care of your babies for a fraction of the cost. The robot would take care of your baby for free, but it's like, then you could safely leave your baby at home with the robot. There'd be no childcare expense except for the cost of the robot and probably some subscription, because you know that's gonna happen. And then, would it shoot up? I mean, you still have to be able to afford the robot. You know what? Actually, I guess if you can't afford a babysitter, you probably can't afford a super intelligent robot.
Norway spends around $30,000 per child on early childhood care. Finland spends $23,000. Germany spends $18,000. And the US spends $500 per child. Obviously, the US has a huge childcare spending problem.
Whoa.
It just doesn't want to invest in young children. But Norway, which is spending incredible amounts on early childhood
is also
care,
dropping. So America made the right choice. We're not wasting our money on the kids. They're going to drop no matter what. Doesn't matter. Let's go.
When we talk about this problem, we tend to lump men and women in together as if their experience of having children is identical, when there are actually some pretty significant differences.
Women's earnings drop significantly after having a child, men's don't. That makes a lot of sense. I could see this being very important. I think you used to be able to live in America with one income from the dad, the mom can stay home, but now you both have to work and it's not easy to do that, and so it would make sense you'd have less kids for that reason alone. So it does feel very economy based.
This is not so much of a problem for men. Men who choose to have kids don't earn significantly less than men who don't choose to have kids. And they don't also experience a short-term drop in the amount that they earn. Gender-based differences in terms of the experience of childcare, I think are a remarkably important factor, because ultimately you need two people to have a child. This tracks with the work of Dr. Matthias Dupke. He's like the guy.
That's a crazy last name, Dupke.
To talk about family economics. It's his area of specialty. He talks at length about the differences between low fertility countries and ultra low fertility countries. In the countries that have the lowest levels of fertility, there is a clear trend of women taking on a greater percentage of the burden of childcare. So in the really low fertility countries, the percentage of childcare duties that is taken on by women can be as high as 80%.
So, that would make sense then if the men are working more?
In countries that have slightly better fertility ratios, this percentage is much closer to 50-50.
Interesting.
There's still a huge stigma in some of these countries, particularly South Korea and Japan, where women are still expected to spend huge amounts of time at home taking care of children, but they can't survive without having a career, or they simply just want a career, which is also...
This is crazy. It really feels economic based right now. But that doesn't make sense, because when we do put the more money in, they still don't have more babies. So I'm confused right now significantly about this.
So very reasonable. The decision to have kids is in some extent...
Wait. What did I say? What did I say about? In 1920, we took children out of the coal mines. In 2020, the most popular Minecraft game is Minecraft. The children yearn for the mines.
In some extent, a signal of optimism, right? A signal in the belief that you'll have a good future, your kid will have a good future, and the world on the whole has a good future ahead of it. And I think these disparate factors all play into a single idea of optimism about the world. There's a really good research group called Our World in Data. They're amazing. They compiled some data on how optimistic people feel about the world. And you can see that there's this concentration of rich, low fertility countries at the bottom of this graph. And I think it helps us at least explain somewhat why
So only 27% of Americans feel good about the future. That's crazy.
countries that are even trialing just direct one-off cash payments and not seeing remarkable improvement.
South Korea has so few babies, it is offering new parents $10,500.
Giving someone a one-off payment doesn't necessarily make them feel like the world is going to be a better place
That does make
the
sense.
next 5, 10, 15 years. On the other hand, places like Taiwan have tried extended maternity leave, and that hasn't worked because that has actually increased the risk for women. They're going to be out of the workforce.
So then that means we should have no maternity leave. Okay, so that'll be my third executive order. Delete maternity and paternity leave. You have a baby, you start working, and within 2 days, you're done. You're fired, all right? We got to keep the hustle alive in my country. We got some ideas up here.
And they're going to struggle to
Maternity
recover
leave gone.
the income that they once had. There are these macro factors like the gender
Housing
wage
prices
gap, which
quadrupled.
kind of creating like a negative pressure, and it's not enough to balance that negative pressure. But importantly, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of the drop in fertility is actually a good thing. It represents that people have agency. People can actually choose whether or not to have children, especially women.
That is an interesting take. I wouldn't say it's a good thing. I get the agency part. I didn't see a study that said they don't want to. It was like, oh, I'm not having one because I can't afford it. It doesn't feel like a choice, kind of, but it kind of doesn't feel like it because they're forced to not be able to because of the fact that they can't afford it. So I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me.
Use the term fertility crisis when it's not really a fertility crisis. It's a worker crisis. Governments aren't trying to create self-actualized, happy, positive individuals. They're trying to create meat for the grinder.
Meat for the grinder. That's going to be the quote, like country. From all that I've heard in this video, it seems very clear there's a lot of factors. Every country's different, but one thing's for sure, money doesn't help, so we're not going to give any money. Investing in children doesn't help, so we're going to cancel all children investment programs. I think robots would help give some free time back, and so I think every family would get a free robot under my administration. I mean, maybe video game sort of inspiration. I'm a gamer, so I might do like a kill streak, but for babies. It's a win streak though, not a kill streak. Don't take that out of context. You have one baby, congrats, here's your daily prize. You say you get up to 10 babies, you get a gold play button for YouTube, but for babies. And then if you have 15, you get a Range Rover. You guys tell me what you think down below, and if you want to see more videos like this reacting to, let me know. I actually really enjoy this. And go check out Fads. You make some good stuff. Peace.